Hello, ladies, gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear students, dear friends. For today's lecture, I chose the subject, My World Facing Other Worlds, peacefully, with a question mark, and you will very soon discover why. My world is a multiple notion, covering a familiar environment that I consider myself a part of. It may be applied at a natural level, the ecosystems in which I evolve, my planet, my galaxy. A personal level, my way of being, of thinking, of feeling. A social level, my family, my friends, my neighbors, all the various social groups I am integrated in. A cultural level, the values, principles, beliefs, customs, lifestyle of cultures that I share. Or even a political level, my city, my country, national structures that I belong in, like the African Union, the European Union, or even international institutions like the United Nations. We are constantly experiencing contacts with other worlds in our everyday life. This may be neutral, from indifferent juxtaposition to simple formal politeness. Positive, going from collegial, cordial cooperation to strong, affectionate links. And negative, starting from a feeling of uneasiness or menace up to a violent conflict. Here I shall focus on the last category, trying to explore the most common reasons of a conflict, to question their necessity, to expose different ways to face these situations, and to defend that is preferable to avoid violent conflicts. Of course, how we can precisely define what is violent and non-violent in a confrontation is still a subject open to discussion. And I would propose that it's better to resolve them peacefully if we wish to attain a harmonious coexistence of the different worlds and even the creation of new ones. I shall also adopt the hypothesis that the same fundamental principles may guide our actions at a personal, social, cultural, or political level in many of these cases, using relevant examples. First point. Why do conflicts occur? Thomas Hobbes, in his famous political work Leviathan, gave three main reasons for war among men. First, competition, which pushes men to invade for gain, as he says. Second, dissidence, secession, leading often to the necessity of defense when one is attacked. Third, glory or pride, and I cite, for trifles, as a word, a smile, a different opinion, and any other sign of undervalue, either direct in their persons or by reflection in their kindred, their friends, their nation, their profession, or their name. In the best case, man wishes to have the other's respect as an equal. In the worst one, sometimes he believes he is superior to the others and he wants to impose himself. We may add also a fourth reason, the wish to help someone attacked, to bring support to close persons or to allies, or to interfere if we consider that an injustice is being committed even against a stranger. I think that if we go back in history, we would agree that the origins of practically all the armed confrontations, from the legendary siege and destruction of Troy, to the Crusades, the two World Wars, and even the terrible actual battles in Yemen or in Ukraine, could enter one or more of these categories. This is also true if we look into the reasons of various fights among smaller social and cultural groups or individuals. Second point, are conflicts inevitable? Many persons already declared that conflicts are natural. We see them everywhere in the struggle for survival among the species and among the individuals or groups of individuals of the same biological species. When it comes to human societies, we can observe a huge number of differences in customs, beliefs, laws, moral values, etc. among groups and individuals since the prehistorical times. This results in a multiplicity of religious, philosophical, political ideas, for example, or even in the uniqueness of every individual's character and preferences in all domains, which may bring one to disagree with other persons on subjects of lesser or greater importance. Different persons or groups may follow opposite and sometimes opposed principles, priorities, and ways of life. Therefore, I think we may accept that conflicts in a broad sense are inevitably a part of our everyday existence at all levels and not necessarily a negative one. 3 point. Different ways to consider conflicts. The natural struggle for survival of all living beings on Earth was used as an argument by some to consider this the main characteristic of our human nature. Nietzsche, for example, insists that the will to power constitutes the essence of humankind as well as of all living beings. In consequence, the imposition by all means of the strongest was often presented as a self-evident principle of ethics and politics from the time of Thrasymachus in Plato's Republic to Machiavelli and to the actual theory of Weltpolitik. However, this struggle of an unlimited development of one individual species, social group or states against all the others proved to result with great probability in a disastrous disequilibrium. If we turn ourselves again towards nature, during the last decades we have become conscious of the catastrophic results of the constantly expansive and inconsiderate attitude of our species towards all the others and towards the natural environment. Our egocentric greed caused a huge damage to the whole planet and eventually led us to the contrary direction by menacing also our species' survival in the long run. Considering the relations among humans, Hobbes, mentioned above, thinks indeed that war is our natural state, but he stresses that it isn't a viable one. If we kept fighting against each other, we would have a life short, full of anxiety and pains. We couldn't develop any kind of civilization. We would just live like wild beasts in the jungle. Therefore, this thinker supports that we have to make mutual concessions and consciously establish a social contract with a government whose authority is accepted by all in order to attain peace, security, and prosperity. Aristotle introduced the idea that man is a political animal, as most of you already know. His nature is to live in organized communities and therefore to develop cooperation in view not only of his simple survival, but also of the best possible life. In the history of the 20th century, the First and especially the Second World War, founded on the will of some countries to conquer and submit all the others, produced incommensurable disasters and horrors. In view of avoiding the same experience in the future, the EU was created in Europe, and the great majority of the globe's countries adopted the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights of the United Nations, which constitutes a common ethical code based on the equal dignity of every human and his right to the egalitarian respect of his life, his liberties, and his well-being. Therefore, we may conclude, I think, that even if the motivations mentioned above can often push people to enter in conflict, individualism, greed, pride, and aggressivity cannot be considered representing the totality of the human nature, which is too complex. Nor could they justify an inconsiderate oppression or destruction of the others. Humans naturally live in societies, and therefore the capacities to cooperate and to share feelings of compassion and affection are also primordial, as Rousseau already underlined. And of course, their attitude towards the inevitable oppositions is defined by the moral values, the customs, and the laws of their societies, which evolved lately towards the respect of the differences and the particularities of each individual or groups of individuals. Apparently, already some decades ago, humanity was rather inspired by ethical principles of Kant. He incited us to adopt the same just behavior towards all, considering every representative of humankind as an end per se, and not simply as a means to an end that we can use to arrive at our own objectives. Thus, by signing the Declaration of the Human Rights, most people chose to leave behind the primitive wish of some for an arbitrary dominion of the strongest, judging it inappropriate for the world we wish to share together. My fourth point: peaceful and constructive attitudes towards conflicts. I would like to pinpoint here that humans aren't just driven by standard reactions. Each person has the ability to reflect critically, to take under consideration various parameters in order to understand and to evaluate a situation, and finally to decide which one of the possible actions he will undertake. We are responsible for our behavior because of our freedom of will, our freedom of choice, intimately linked to our rationality, as was already supported by many thinkers, and I would just cite one, Thomas Aquinas. Heraclitus claimed that war is the father of all. But the interpretation of this fragment could be better understood, I think, if we take under consideration that for this philosopher the world is composed of opposite, day, night, winter, summer, heat, cold, which should arrive at a harmonious complementarity according to the universal reason, logos. Heraclitus insisted that humans also possess rationality, and therefore they should use it to understand the world and themselves. Then they would know how to act optimally facing the apparent oppositions. Spinoza agrees that if man follows his reason, he can become wiser and behave like a god towards the others. So, when someone faces a conflict, he may have various alternatives to think over while remaining in accordance with the globally accepted principles of mutual equal respect among all human beings, as we saw before. Let us examine some representative examples of possibilities of peaceful and constructive attitudes. First, avoid the conflict. When a conflict starts, it may arrive at a psychological, verbal, or even physical violence that can easily become uncontrollable and with unpredictable, devastating results. Therefore, some persons may prefer to avoid this kind of friction altogether, either by preventing it or by refusing to get involved in it. Please permit me here to relate a small personal anecdote. I have practiced various traditional martial arts since I was an adolescent, like the greatest part of my auditory here. And I always remember my first teacher, who was a Japanese, Sensei Tetsuo Odake. He was very demanding, and also when it came to matters of self-control. And he used to say that the best fight is the one that never takes place. Second possibility. Keep a respectful disagreement. There are disagreements where each part may keep its own position, respecting the other's difference. It is notably the case of subjective beliefs, opinions, and tastes. A particular religious faith, or the absence of faith, for example, doesn't have to be shared by all. It is extremely personal. Nor should religious differences be a reason of conflict among people who respect each other's liberty on the matter. Third possibility. If action is necessary, accept the majority's opinion. In a democracy, the multiple opinions on various aspects of the political life and the administration could coexist peacefully. Each part tries to convince the others by the use of rational arguments. According to Habermas' theory of communicative action, the best ideas should be taken under consideration as objectively as possible by all, without any wish to impose one's opinion by using strategic means, as he calls them, based on manipulation, that could influence the final issue of the discussion. When the decision for a common action has to be taken, the opinion supported by the majority will be adopted. One doesn't necessarily have to agree, but he accepts the fundamental rule of the democratic function as the best possible way to realize the organization of the society's common life. Concord in a democratic society doesn't imply uniformity or a lack of confrontations, but it leads to a final practical result adopted by all within the frame of respectful efforts to convince and the acceptance of disagreements. Fourth possibility, transcend the conflict in view of constructing something new. In some cases, the will to arrive at a true consensus is greater than the simple acceptance of the majority's opinion. Therefore, more exchanges are necessary so that everyone feels satisfied with the final decision, even if it isn't his initial position. Though Hegel's idealism and Marx's materialism are definitely opposed theories, both philosophers agree in the way the world may progress according to a dialectical scheme of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That is, they expect that at a certain moment, a situation contrary to the previous one will arise, and from this conflict, a new step forward will be achieved containing the successful composition of the best elements of the prior two stages. The effort to find ways to transcend the conflict by imagining something new, which combines in an original way the initially opposed elements, is perhaps the most difficult and delicate attitude, but certainly the most creative one. It can be seen, for example, in the diplomatic domain, when a country or the representatives of the United Nations play the role of mediators to help the negotiations between two or more countries engaged in hostilities in view of the return of peace. Thus, when worlds collide, they may also lead to the creation of new worlds. Many thanks to the organizers of this TEDx event for their invitation, to all the people who worked to realize it, and to all of you for your attention.